I know we have talked extensively about the problem of violence and the many aspects that it affects our lives. We've talked about joining organizations or setting up community groups or having discussions. That certainly can make a difference. What we need to understand a little bit more about is the kinds of programs that may already be in your community that you can research and look up and volunteer if necessary. If there are programs related to mentoring young adults, persons in the child welfare system, individuals who are in after-school programs who need additional support and assistance, not only with mentoring, but with tutoring. These are all strategies to establish a close relationship in a situation where you can listen as well as share on how to prevent violence. There are many. You can look at programs designed to educate and work with parents. Parenting is a very difficult job, and there's so many aspects, and there's no one rule. But young parents tend to be less experienced and not really recognize when their child needs additional help, or when that child may be experiencing some emotional traumas themselves. Mentoring, parenting, after-school programs. We can certainly look at options for working with already established agencies. The focus on things like gun violence and police violence, serving as a sounding board, being on an advisory committee, making suggestions and recommendations that can, in fact, turn a problem into a solution. And certainly, we have to look at accountability. How do we hold people who are not meeting the needs of our community? How do we hold them accountable? What are the issues within the court system? What are the issues within law enforcement? And certainly, what are the issues within schools? There are many, many ways of approaching violence prevention. Violence prevention is not just primary, secondary, and tertiary, as it has been thought of for many years. It really is a full circle approach, looking at oneself and looking at the violence prevention avenues that you believe in and that you use. Looking within your own family. What are the risks of violence, particularly in terms of domestic violence and situations where you are likely to harm someone or someone's likely to harm another person. This could be child violence, could be dating violence. All of these have different approaches, but they begin with understanding that you can make a difference. Participating in an organization such as the National Partnership to End Interpersonal Violence is critical, because you will surround yourself with individuals who share your same values, who are very much committed to reducing harm in communities. And this is where the knowledge base can be increased, understanding what the data is saying. How often does a problem occur? Who is most at risk? What are the risk factors? There are many, many aspects to violence prevention. That means that there's something in it for everyone to focus on and to take a stance to address. When I think about violence prevention, I recognize from the time a child is born, home visitations, teaching mom how to not shake that baby or dad or other family members, to handle that baby with care. And we know babies are going to cry. And we know that violence against infants is the highest mortality group. We need to really make that a clear avenue, and what to do when your baby is hysterically crying and you've done everything you could do. And you've called the pediatrician and you've changed the diaper. and you've offered food. Then we need to look deeper. Again, working with professionals who are familiar with infants and young children. The school system needs to be completely, it's not easy just to say this is a no-hit zone or this is a, non-drug zone. Somebody has to monitor that, and not only monitor it, but hold people accountable who violate it, and really look to see, are we really protecting individuals in these environments as well? Parenting, parent education, group support, reading, becoming familiar with these avenues, understanding culture and ethnicity and the beliefs and values of various communities. And clearly there's gun violence prevention that takes a whole host of strategies, whether we're talking about reducing gun violence through registration, through making sure that the red flags, people understand what red flags are. There are many communities that have red flag laws, and people don't even know they have them, and they don't know what the red flags are. So we need public service announcements. We need more educational documentaries that really help people think and feel and take action. Action is what we're looking for. That's the only way we're going to quell this high rising evidence of violence in all of our communities and our homes. And there are people who have studied this, who have suggestions, recommendations, strategies, scientific evidence that certain things work. We need to know what those things are. And we need to see, do they work in this community? Communities are not all the same. There are rural communities. There are urban communities. There are suburban communities. There are communities that focus on gender-specific issues. We need to find the one that makes the most sense in the environment that we're in. And certainly we need to educate our young people. Dating violence. What is a healthy relationship? How do you get out of a relationship if you feel it's violent and inappropriate? How do you protect yourself? What kind of safety plans do you have? What kind of measures or thoughts do you have to protect yourself against people who may have weapons? It may be guns or knives or other kinds of harmful tools. Do they show an interest in that? These are the things that will help us move forward in violence prevention. So I implore you to please go on the website, look at the National Partnership to End Interpersonal Violence, join one of the committees, bring to the attention of others what your thoughts are about preventing violence. And violence can be found everywhere. There's no reason to say it's not going to happen in this community or that community. It's going to happen almost everywhere where there are people. And we need to be ready. We need to be held accountable if we're not doing the things that we are hired to do, assigned to do, expected to do, whether we're in systems. And we certainly need to know the kinds of things to help make logical, humane decisions for the protection and safety of another human being. This is what violence prevention must be. Everything starts with prevention before it happens. If it happens, what to do quickly. What happens not to make it any worse. And certainly to make sure that people around you take a stand. There's no such thing as being a bystander who's going to look the other way and pretend it didn't happen when it did. Without the courage and the involvement of many people, much of the violence would be a whole lot worse. We hear those heroes on the trains. We hear them in the airplanes, particularly during that 9/11 experience. We almost have to be prepared for it to happen, particularly when we're in crowded spaces or when we're in not so crowded spaces with individuals who have a propensity toward violence and harming others. These are the things that we should look out for. These are the things we're trying to prevent. The National Partnership to End Interpersonal Violence is one vehicle, it's one mode. But other groups, form your own group, form your neighborhood group. But don't make your neighborhood watch group a vigilante group. Don't make these groups to be the problem rather than the solution. All of us have to take a stance to make sure that as we think about and as we deal with violence, that we go about it in a way that's logical. Certainly, we know that there's a lot that we could done with the school system in terms of accountability, education, information. There's a lot could be done with the law enforcement and policing, community policing. What does that really mean? Does it mean you go out and beat up on people who are in the community? Or does it mean you're trying to protect the community from people who are likely to do harm? And when you see people, you can't always suspect everybody's doing harm, particularly if it's a person of color. That's a dangerous situation to find yourself in. And this is unfortunately what happens over and over again. It's assumed that if you're a person of color, you're up to doing something negative and harmful. And nothing could be further from the truth. So we have to find our own truths and really move toward addressing them in a way that's protective of children, women, men, groups, institutions, agencies, and all the way up so that we can have a more peaceful environment. Okay.